Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical trivia and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, Gods Can't See You in role-playing games. I've just finished recording some ancient Egyptian folktales for LibriVox, and I'm particularly interested in the story of Na-Nefer-Ka-Ptah, in which he steals the spellbook of Thoth, who is the god of wizardry. He does this using various spells that allow him to create the sort of living statues that haunt so many dungeons. He also defeats a vast regenerating serpent by rubbing sand into its wounds to create a physical barrier that prevents the pieces from reuniting. All lovely stuff, proving that some gaming tropes are older than the pyramids. The thing which interested me is that Thoth takes a couple of days to become aware that his magic book has been stolen. He then goes to Ra, who says, "Sure, you can kill him and his family," which Thoth does using a magical compulsion. The compulsion is carried by a spiritual agent rather than Thoth himself. This is, as the translator notes, unexpected by people who are used to the Judeo-Christian conception of the divine. Egyptian gods aren't omnipresent or omnipotent, and they don't know what you're doing the vast majority of the time. To know things, they need either to perceive them using the limited perceptive capacities of their bodies, or to be told by minions. These are limited in number, because unlike in the Judeo-Christian conception, there isn't an angel crouching by every blade of grass encouraging it to grow. Writing Lands of the Nile for Ars Magica gave me a chance to think further about this, because there's a famous scene that turns up, the weighing of the heart from the Book of the Dead. If you're familiar with ancient Egyptian mythology at all, you'll know this. There's a set of scales, and the heart is in a little urn on the left, and the feather of truth is on the right, and if you fail the test, a crocodile-faced thing that sits underneath the scale consumes you. The reason this test is necessary is because the gods don't actually know if you're guilty or not. They don't have omniscience. Your sins change you in a spiritual way, and the change is detectable, but only through this ritual process, not via casual observation. The funerary texts of the Egyptians are spells, and the function of the spell is to wreck the test, so that the human always passes on to paradise, regardless of the state of their heart. The gods are fooled by this, even Thoth, the god of magic, who stands right there with his pen to write down the result. Thoth is strangely limited for a god of cleverness. Perhaps this is like the ancient Greek gods who, because they were once given the skin and bones as a sacrifice, forever after had to accept the skin and bones as sacrifice, leaving the meat to the humans. Our way around this in Ars Magica is that gods are powerful fairies, and they care about the emotions generated by the ritual, not the ritual itself. They don't mind if superficially you're conning them. Well, the Eater of the Dead probably minds, but no one asks her. In one version of ancient Egyptian mythology, this lack of omniscience is particularly significant concerning the god Ra. One of Ra's many powers is that he's the god of the sun. As the god of the sun, he sees everything that the sun sees, which gives him tremendous power, compared to the other gods, of knowing what mortals are doing. Ra loses this power, depending on which myth cycle you're looking at, to one of the various gods who succeed him and take his name as a suffix, like Amon-Ra. Perhaps the best known taker of Ra's power is Isis, who grants the power, eventually, to her son Horus. Now, Horus has the power of the sun, but he has a weak left eye, which is the moon. Because Horus is both sun and moon, the hawk-headed god is able to tell what you're doing pretty much all of the time. Sadly for you, he's a familial god for the pharaoh. He doesn't particularly care what happens to people who aren't his lineal descendants. This ability to see what you're doing pretty much all of the time is what makes Horus the chief god, the lawgiver of the gods, because he's the one who can make sure that the humans are doing what the gods are asking them to. So with that one notable exception, the other Egyptian gods are all terribly similar to the Arks, which, as we describe in the book, is what the people who were mummified were kind of hoping would happen to them. which is that their spirit would recoalesce inside their form, creating a sort of living immortal. These living immortals have powers, a little bit like superheroes, but also, given that the Egyptian gods are so limited, and most of them are blood relatives of Horus's, a little bit like the powers of gods. So what does this mean for us as game designers? Well, first it explains why your characters aren't smited for destroying the servants of evil, as often as they do. It's because if you round up and destroy all of the servants of evil, none of them can pray to their god, so there are no witnesses, so the god doesn't know that you're the one causing all the trouble. It also explains why curses from ancient Egypt are so ineffective. The spirit that is acting as the guarantor of the curse probably has a great deal to do and isn't paying attention when the curse is broken. What needs to happen is that some small spirit needs to be acting as a guardian so that once you break the curse, that small spirit flees to the land of reeds and reports you to the gods. This can, of course, be prevented by the characters merely destroying the small spirit. Say it's a tiny living statue. So once again, completely ransacking a tomb, because it destroys all of the witnesses, may act as some sort of protection against the wrath of the ancient Egyptian gods.